Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Bikes to Death podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I am your host. And my guest today is Chris Smith, who just finished the Tour Divide. For the fast racers, the race has been over for a while now, and some of them are actually on the Colorado Trail race right now. But Chris Smith just finished the Tour Divide about a week ago. He did it in 47 days, 10 hours, and was second to last place. And adding to his story, Chris was declared legally blind in 2009, but he didn't let that stop him. In fact, it led to some amazing life transformations, challenges, and accomplishments. Chris's story on how he went from being declared legally blind in 2009 to racing and completing the Tour Divide in 2024 is the topic and conversation of today's episode. But before we get into it, let's take a moment to thank the people that made today's episode possible, starting with our latest batch of patrons. So this week, we'd like to thank Nathaniel Ray for signing up to be a sustaining member of the Bikes for Death podcast. And if you would like to help support the show and these episodes, a great way to do that is on Patreon. You can find all the information at patreon.com/Bikes for Death. All right, everybody. Well, today on the podcast, I got Shane Hitz from the Red Granite Grinder to talk about, a couple of events. We're going to be discussing a couple of events that you're promoting there in the area. Shane, welcome back on the podcast. You've been on before. We did an episode together, so welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Patrick.
And I think it's worth mentioning right off the top that you and I did record a podcast about the Red Granite Grinder that we're going to be talking about today. So for anybody who's interested in learning even more information, you can go back in the archives and find that one. But for people who aren't familiar, Shane, what is the Red Granite Grinder?
So it's a gravel adventure race. So with the emphasis on adventure, because we use a lot of private land sections that go off of the gravel roads. So we have 15 landowners altogether that we have to get permission from to go on this route, and those are only available on race day, which makes this race a very unique race. So lengths of the courses, we have a 12-mile kids race, we have a 50-mile, we have an 85-mile, and we have a 144-mile. One of the unique sections on that course is a corn maze that's available on the 50-mile race. So that is a pretty unique section that everybody loves, and people embrace that stuff.
Yeah, man. You got a little bit of everything for everyone. And one of the coolest things about that course is how you worked with all the different landowners. So this really is like a one-time chance to ride this route at this time. So yeah, when is it, and where can people go to register for that event?
So the Red Granite Grinder takes place on Saturday, October 12th. And on Friday, we have registration, which we also have a bunch of stuff going on. We have live music. We have a women's skills clinic, which we're big on because we want to attract a lot more women into this race. And we have group ride for everybody to go on. And then the week leading up to the race, we have a lot of group rides that I just kind of pop up on the Iron Bowl Facebook page.
Very cool. Very cool. But wait, there's more. If you get a taste of gravel and you want a little bit more in the Wisconsin area, Shane, I know that you're very well known for your bikepacking and especially like your route building. And you have a new event, a bikepacking summit. So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the bikepacking summit was first time we had it was last year. So it's a couple of three different routes that I offer on that. And it's a 75-mile overnighter loop, 225-mile. We recommend 3 to 4 days on that one. And then a 365-mile, which is like a 5 to 7 day loop. Registration for that is also on the ironbowl.org website page. You can register there, and the event actually starts on a Thursday night, and then they get Thursday night camping and Friday night camping. And we charge $60 for that, and $5 of that goes towards planting trees in Langley County.
Very cool, Shane. Well, for anyone who hasn't been in that area before, I can tell you it is absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful place to ride. So I'll put all the information on how to find out more and how to register in the show notes. Thanks for coming on, Shane. Good to see you.
Thanks, Patrick. Good to see you too.
All right, bye-bye. All right, everybody. Today on the podcast, we have Jeff with Follow My Challenge USA. Jeff, welcome to the podcast, man.
Hey, Patrick. Thanks for having us on. Really glad that you reached out to us and we were able to work together, and I'm excited about this opportunity.
Absolutely, man. So I met y'all whenever I was looking for tracking service for my own races. So y'all have done East Texas Showdown, and we're gearing up for Central Texas Showdown right now, and you guys did a great job. So I'm happy to have you on the podcast to talk about it. And I think a good starting point is just introduce Follow My Challenge for anybody who doesn't know what that is. What is Follow My Challenge?
Follow My Challenge is a live GPS tracking service specializing in live event tracking, and also for individuals that want to track their challenge live and have it displayed on a map. You know, we work with all kinds of different groups, such as race promoters like yourself, predominantly bike pack racing, but we also work with different events. But we also individuals looking to have their own challenge and they want their family and friends to be able to follow along. We also live track them as well.
What are some of the things that you think really sets Follow My Challenge apart? Like, what are some of the highlights, some of the key features of your service that you're really proud of?
You know, first and foremost, the two things that I think stand out that we pride ourselves in are customer service. So we are very responsive. You can attest to that. And I'm sure all the promoters and people we work with would also agree with that. But that's something we find to be very important when looking for a tracking service. I want to know, as the promoter of an event, that I can trust the people that I'm relying on to live track my event, that they're going to be there for us. But really, we also find that our software itself is, of course, we might be biased, but I think we're first in our class in terms of the look of our maps and really the richness of the layers and the features that our maps provide, really going to enhance the actual dot watching experience for those that are watching a race unfold. But then also, I think from a race promoter type standpoint, we also offer a lot of features that can be extremely helpful when you're trying to watch a race of several hundred competitors over hundreds of mile-long course. You really want to know where those people are and have information about them. And our maps really do that. The maps we have feature some really interesting features that set us apart from other companies that also are in our line of business. And I think the product really speaks for itself when you go actually dive in what we can actually offer. Again, I'm biased, but I'm going to say it's night and day from what else is out there. So I would say, you know, the customer service as well as our premium map and their features are what make us stand out. But we also have the hardware to go back it up as well, too. So our maps integrate with bike pack racers that have their own software, or hardware rather. But we also provide hardware to our events when people need to rent those devices for the event that they're participating in. And we maintain a large fleet of trackers to be able to do that.
Very cool. Yeah, I can, like you said, personally attest. I think the customer service aspect is huge. Whenever you're running an event, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people in the field and you need answers quickly. So having somebody that you can call, and you guys were in constant communication with me through the entire weekend. And also the maps are great. So we are going to be diving into more of Follow My Challenge on forthcoming mini pods. So we're going to be unpacking Follow My Challenge and kind of diving into the nitty and gritty. But I think that's a great introduction to Follow My Challenge. And if people are interested in learning more about the product, the services that y'all offer, where should people go?
Yeah, there's a few ways they can reach out to us. Our website is followmychallenge.com, and they can navigate to the USA tab there, and that'll point directly. You'll see my picture on there. You'll see my business partner, Chris Moore, his picture's on there, and you'll have a link there to be able to reach out to us with an inquiry. You can also just email us at info@followmychallengeusa.com, or you can just hit us up on Instagram at followmychallengeusa. Any one of those will put you in direct contact with us.
And I'll also put it in the show notes. So, yeah, thanks for coming on, Jeff. And we will hop on another mini pod very soon. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Patrick. I really look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye. All right. Ching, ching, ching. The bills have been paid. And now it is time to get to my chat with Chris Smith. But first, let's have my friend Miles Arbor kick it off with the Bikes for Death theme song.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends or you could be alone. You ride for a day or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You left that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes or death. Bikes or death. Podcast.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the podcast today. Chris Smith, just back from the Tour Divide. You were, one of the last finishers. But before we get into all that, welcome to the show, Chris.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Excited to chat. We had first place, second place Tour Divide finishers. We've had the youngest Tour Divide finisher, and let's get the record straight. So I have 47 days, 10 hours, and Track Leaders shows that you were second to last finisher on this year's Tour Divide. Does that sound right?
That sounds right, yes.
So we're going to cover the breadth, and I'm excited to chat with you today. There's always a lot of discussion about what's harder, whether it be going faster or going slower. And I can tell you from talking to some of the fastest racers in the world that they all carry a lot of respect and admiration for people like you who are out there for much, much longer and enduring everything, all the saddle sores, the aches, the pains, the weather. That's a whole different endurance sport,
Yeah. I mean, and add into that, like family obligations and work and, putting your life on hold for that period of time. There were a lot of challenges, off the bike as well. But that being said, what they do is just amazing. And, I don't know. It can compare, but I mean, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. I don't know if there is a comparison. I don't know if we need to draw one. I think they're both impressive, and it's amazing that anybody can finish the Tour Divide, and anybody who does it should feel very proud, no matter how long it takes. So, I want to know just right off the bat, when did you finish the Tour Divide? How long ago, how long have you been home?
Just over a week. I think it was a week ago on Friday. So I had a little time to adjust. And it's, it was amazing the first couple of days. There's indoor plumbing. I could find water anytime I wanted it. There's food. It was amazing. And then, as time's gone by, man, I miss being out there.
Oh, really? You're already missing it?
Oh, yeah, big time.
That was my first question, is how have you adjusted to home life, because like you mentioned, life is kind of busy at home. There's work and family obligations oftentimes. And when you're out on the divide, all you have to do is pedal your bike. And I say all you have to do. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but what's that adjustment been like for you coming home?
It's I'm not going to say it's tough. I mean, it's as expected. It's, I miss being out there. Like I said, the challenges were brown going for a bike ride every day and going through some of the most spectacular scenery our country has to offer. And figuring out where resources were and, what the day would look like, how far you could push yourself, things like that. And now it's work is, I'm glad to be back at work, but it's work. I'm excited to see my family, but I also need to go mow the lawn. It's an adjustment period. I'm looking forward to get back on the bike. My bike actually gets back from it was being shipped. It should be back today, and I get to go through tonight, and then got a decent run planned this weekend.
Oh,
So looking
nice.
forward to get back in the saddle. Yeah.
Sometimes we hear about post-trip blues. Have you been experiencing any of that sadness of just not, yeah, being out there on your bike every day?
Um, yeah, I mean, like I said, it's in the back of my head all the time. I'm thinking about where would I be if I were still out on the tour today? What would I be doing right now? But
Probably riding back to
I
Canada if you wanted to keep
yeah,
going.
that's right, do the yo-yo. But at the same time, I'm so excited that I had the opportunity. I had the flexibility to extend and make sure I finish this thing. Um, so it's I'm so grateful for having the opportunity that I don't want to you know I can't be upset, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We all got to work and fit in the recreation where we can, most of us. So, how'd you celebrate? What did you do to celebrate your well, let's call it a victory on the Tour Divide?
Um, Not much, honestly. You know, a friend of mine actually flew out to El Paso, picked me up at Antelope Wells. We went and celebrated with a great dinner at a fast food place at 10 o'clock at night. And then got the bikes shipped out the next morning, hopped on a plane, got home. I think my wife had just come back that day from a business trip. My son was still off at camp. I went and saw some friends. The next morning was a big charity ride up here in Massachusetts, and so I went out to support some of the teams that are out riding, cheer them on, and then just went and hung out with some friends that evening, and got back into normal life. So no big celebration, just getting back into it.
Was it good to see people, your friends and family after that long?
Oh,
I have to imagine it gets lonely out there.
absolutely. Um, you know, I mean, we may get into this later, but the one of the big surprises for me is how not lonely it was, between other riders out there, and then people you meet along the way. But then I had so much support and so many friends reaching out the whole time that I never felt alone out there.
Yeah.
Um, so it's mostly good to see them again in person, to say thank you for that support, best I can. Which, I don't know if it will ever be adequate, but at least I can say it to their face.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, before we dive all the way into the Tour Divide, let's back up and get to know you a little bit. We'll start easy. Where do you live and work? What do you do, and where are you?
I live in Medfield, Massachusetts. It's a little community outside of Boston. I work in cybersecurity for a company that does cancer genomics. So
Which is
sounds
what?
so we do so we do testing of cancer cells for people that are, I guess, testing of tumors, to determine individual variants that are causing individual cancers. That then allows you to be matched up with personalized treatments.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Very important
it's pretty
work.
remarkable stuff. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. How are you able to take off so much time from work and from family life to, you were almost out there 50 days. So I assume with travel and everything, you were probably gone longer than 50 days.
Yeah, just a little bit, but yeah. So I'm fortunate enough, my company has a sabbatical program. So after you've been there for 6 years, you can take up to 6 weeks off. And then,
Wow.
they actually let me extend that a little bit as I got close to the end.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so that was the genesis of the whole thing, is that, um, I wanted to do something with sabbatical that was meaningful to myself and to community. Um, and so that's when I started looking at actually, pursuing a dream to ride Tour Divide.
Wow.
I'm not sure I can say
That
race Tour Divide because it took 48 days.
we're going to talk about that. That is so rare in America to have a company that offers that. So kudos to your company. I wish more American companies and just kind of the American work culture was um, more geared in that direction, giving people the
Yeah.
opportunity, the freedom, the flexibility to be able to do something like this, because that's a perfect example of when you give that to people, they do stuff like this. And not
Right.
only is this meaningful to you, but also to, people in your life that might see you and you might inspire, and, how it might impact your happiness at work and your happiness at life. And, there's a lot of, I think, implications or benefits of that. And that's just a great example of like when you give people an opportunity to enjoy their life and to spend their time, they're going to do some cool shit, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of stories of people who've gone out in their sabbatical and done, coding projects, or other, just other remarkable things that they never would have had the opportunity to do besides, adventuring, things like that. But no matter what it is, there's lessons I've learned out there that I'll be able to take back to work. And if nothing else, like, I'm excited to get back at it now. I've had a break, my mind's been reset, and let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Well, there's a little bit more to your story that we haven't touched on, and that's that you are legally blind. So not only did you complete the Tour Divide, but you did so with a lot less vision than other riders. And so that's kind of a undercurrent, I guess, of your whole story. And so why don't you tell us, like, about your condition, like what do you have, and how does it manifest itself? Yeah.
Sure. So I have I have a condition called Stargardt's disease. And it's a genetic, or it's an inherited retinal disorder, that causes, essentially in your retina is composed of rods and cones. As they work, they build up toxins. In most people, those toxins are cleared off. In mine, they accumulate, and what ends up happening is I lose parts of my retina, which ends up being, it ends up as central vision loss. And so, if you and I were sitting at a restaurant across the table from each other, I would look right at you. I wouldn't be able to see you at all. I'd be able to see the table, the ceiling, the other people in the restaurant, but in order to see you, I would have to look away from you.
Oh, wow. And so, like, how much of your center vision is lost? Like, I don't know, maybe right now looking at me, like, how much of the picture are you seeing?
So right now I'm looking at the computer screen. I can't see the screen at all. I have to look away. You could be making, crazy faces at me. I'd have no idea.
I had to test you. Is he
I'm on to
really?
you now. Yeah. And then the other part of this is that your detailed vision comes from your center vision, an area called the macula. And so one of the tough things for me is not only do I have this giant blind spot in front of me, I don't have the detail to be able to see things like text on a sign. What ends up happening is, the visual acuity is measured like 20/20, right? My visual acuity is 2600, which means, what a normal person can see from 600 feet away, I need to be 20 feet away. Or if you think about you're standing on the side of a road looking at a sign, if that's 100 feet away for a normal person who can read that sign, I need to be 1/6 of 20, whatever the math is, like a couple feet away. So I basically need to go right up to a sign in order to read it.
Wow.
Which makes navigation tricky, makes finding resources and places to get food and things like that in a place like Tour Divide a little more
I
challenging.
mean, it's got to make everything except for sleeping tricky, just about. I mean, right? Like,
Yeah.
when are you not using your eyes?
Yeah.
It's one of the most, I mean, I don't know how you rank the senses. You might have thought more about this as a person with blindness, but it's got to be one of the more important senses that we have as human beings. So it's just got to manifest itself every day, all day long until you're sleeping.
Yep. And the funny thing is, though, so I was diagnosed in the year 2000. So I've had this for 24 years, and it's progressed slowly. 15 years ago, I was declared legally blind, and that's when I lost my license. And but it's been long enough now that I forget that other people don't have this and they can't see things. So, I'll
Really
be riding along with someone and they'll call out something, and I'm like, how do they know? Oh, right. They can actually read that sign.
interesting.
Yeah.
So do you miss it,
You know
or
what?
you just kind of come to
Yeah.
accept it like that? Yeah, that surprises me.
So, yes, of course, it's challenging. There's a lot of, I can't read the mail that comes to the house. When I work, I work on a computer and I use the screen zoomed in, and it's very slow for me. There's definitely a lot of challenges associated with it. At the same time, you know, before I started losing my vision, I was not a healthy person. I had gained a lot of weight. I stopped weighing myself and I was over 300 pounds. Um, and my dad died in his early 60s from diabetes and heart failure, and I was on that same path. Um, and then when I lost my license is when I started riding, and that's when I met some amazing people that are still some of my closest friends today. And most of my social circles now are people I've met through riding. So it certainly has had its challenges, but I wouldn't have done Tour Divide. If I hadn't lost my eyesight, I would have done a lot of the things. So it's been, like I said, it's had some challenges, but it's had some blessings as well.
It's a really interesting thing. I've followed other athletes and I don't know, you hear things on like documentaries and whatnot, but you'll hear about people that, maybe get an accident and lose a limb, and they make the choice to not let it get them down, and they actually go on, and I've heard this story of people who accomplish more after a loss like that than they feel like they would have afterwards.
Yeah.
That's
No,
interesting.
yeah, no doubt. I wouldn't be, who I am or where I am today if I hadn't lost my vision.
Yeah, and researching you, I have a inkling of an idea of what may have led to that, and I think the bikes are a pretty important part of your personal story. And I want to shift over to that, but I had one more question about your blindness, and I'm curious. So you said that you were diagnosed in 2000, and then in 2009 you were declared legally blind. Is your condition one that continues to deteriorate? Will you continue to have more and more blindness, or are you kind of at a steady state now?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell, to be honest with you, because as of the time that I was declared blind 15 years ago, when you look at the eye chart and you see that giant ridiculous E at the top of it, and you're like, why is that even there? That's there for that.
It's for
That's
you.
there for me. Yeah, exactly. That's the best I can do. So actually trying to measure how much vision I have is really difficult. I wear normal contact lenses in addition, to correct normal farsightedness or nearsighted, I forget which is which. Um, and trying to determine what the right prescription is really hard because I can't see enough detail to be able to measure what the right focus is. It's difficult to measure precisely, and it's not a straight line, or it's never been a straight line degradation. It's been, plateaus. It's gone downhill a little bit. It's maintained. It's gone downhill a little bit. It's kind of staggered down. Um, the prognosis overall, most of the people that get Stargardts or have Stargardts are diagnosed between the ages of 6 and 10, and those people will typically go fully blind. Because I wasn't diagnosed until my 20s, the prognosis is much better for me. So it's unlikely that I'll ever fully lose all of my vision. Um, so I think that's a long answer of saying, I think it's pretty much where it is, and I should be good going forward. Um, but there's no guarantees. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, man, that's got to be scary and like just ominous to kind of live with that. Do you feel a sense of pressure to get things done, to see the things and do the things in the chance that you do continue to lose blindness? God, I don't even like asking that question.
Yeah.
Like, honestly,
No, it's a good
I
question
don't
though.
like
So,
it.
honestly, when I was first diagnosed, yes. I felt like I wanted to go out and especially I knew I was going to lose my license at some point. So I bought a car I really liked. I did a lot of, car things. I went on a road trip around the US because I just didn't know what the future would hold. Um, Honestly, once I crossed that threshold of legal blindness, I got to the other side, things are okay. So I don't know if I'll be able to ride a bike in 10 years or not. I don't know if I might not be able to for other reasons. Um, so I always feel a little bit of that pressure, but not just because of eyesight. Um, and I think once, crossing that threshold really did release some of that pressure because now now there is no more driving. Now there is no more, you know, life has changed, but it's okay. You know, it's not,
Yeah.
I'm not, confined to my house. I'm not, walking with a cane. Um, things are okay.
Absolutely, man. Um, so let's talk about bikes. How were you introduced to bicycles?
Yeah, so I grew up back in the day with a, BMX bike and then an early mountain bike back when I was a kid growing up in Connecticut in the woods. And I used to go ride, horse trails mostly. And then I moved up to Boston to go to college, and the bike, took a back seat. And then when I was diagnosed, I said, well, that's riding a bike would be a terrible idea. And I sold the bike I had. Um, Cut to, when I was finally declared legally blind, um, functionally at work, I could still do my job. I could still, I had assistive text or assistive technologies. And, there was no difference between the day before I was declared legally blind and the day after, except I could no longer drive a car to get to work. Um, so my office was about 3 miles from home. And I said, well, I need a license to drive a car, but you don't need a license to ride a bike. So I picked up an old hybrid bike and rode to work. Um, and back then, as I said, I was a big guy. I was not in shape, and that 3 mile ride was tough. There's one hill that nowadays I would just downshift once or twice and just steam up it. Back in those days, I would have to stop and rest for a while. And it was tough to get into work. It was tough to get home, but I did it and kept doing it, and it got better. And then the next year, so that happened in November. Coming into next spring, I was getting into better shape and ended up meeting up with some colleagues that rode early in the mornings, and I started riding with them. And that recreational riding made it easier for me to commute. The commuting made it easier for me to ride recreationally with them. And, the whole thing kind of took off. Next thing you know, I'm looking to do longer weekend rides. I did my first century that next fall. And then started looking for, newer and bigger challenges.
Wow. So when you first decided to pick up a touring bike and ride to work, was that like the obvious choice for you where you're like, oh, I'll just ride to work? Or did you hem haw with a bunch of other ideas and finally just kind of land on the bike?
There wasn't really a lot of options. I guess I could have gotten looked for rides from other colleagues. There is a para-transit system in the Boston area that ironically I didn't qualify for. I wasn't blind enough. I
Oh,
think you
wow.
need to, the test is you can't walk more than, I think it's like 100 yards on your own, something like that. Um,
That is so messed
so,
up. They're like, you can't drive, but also you don't qualify for public transit. So have fun.
yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's.
Yeah, kind of
But it
feeling
led
the
you to the
soul.
bike, so it's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and I feel bad for anyone else in the situation, that
Absolutely, yeah,
can't ride.
exactly. Yeah, there's a
There's
gap
definitely a
there.
gap there. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, and I forgot. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, it was the bike like your kind of first
Oh,
thought, or did you explore the things? Because I'm even thinking you might even
yeah.
like move closer to work, but
Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, 3 miles is pretty close around here. Um, I actually did get a Segway for a while. Um,
I love it.
yeah, that worked out actually
That
really
sounds
well because
dangerous.
it was totally, yeah, yep. I crashed a couple times. And when you crash a Segway, the whole thing, if it gets to the point where it can't handle balancing you, it just turns off. And so if you get in a situation where it is about to crash, it goes south real bad, real fast. Um, but yeah, so I used that for a couple seasons to get to work when it's nice out, um, which is nice because you didn't have to worry about getting hot and sweaty. Um, so that was a good solution for when I live close to work. But
Yeah.
that came along later. Bikes really were, I think, the only answer I could come up with other than, asking people for rides, which, I'm sure there are plenty of people who have, offered to do that. Um, I just, it's not for me a sustainable answer to, ask for other people's help all the time. So,
Right. You still
um,
want the freedom of independence and be able to get to where you need to get to on your own and not wait on, for somebody. That's
yep.
not ideal. Not ideal.
And, and work as a genesis, but there's also, going to the grocery store or going to, the coffee shop, anything else. I also, got the bike out and rode that. Go to get a haircut,
Yeah. What was that first ride like? That first ride to work? I mean, again, being legally blind, you can't really see that well. You're also over 300 pounds, not in the best physical shape. I mean, what was that first ride like?
It was tough. And the mental side too of like, it had been easy to hop in my car, 3 mile drive to work, no big deal. Um, Now I'm out here, not of my own choice, pedaling a bike and, thinking about people watching me go by and seeing a, big guy on a bike and what's he doing out here. Um, that sort of thing was all going through my mind. Physically, it was tough. My legs hurt all the time, for the first few months because it just, it's New England, there's constant rolling hills. So you're going uphill, you're going downhill, and it takes a while to get accustomed to that. So it was slow, it was hard, but I got in there and did it, and
What about,
then you have to
oh,
turn around and
sorry.
do it again at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was in November, so it was dark too. So I had a fortunately at work, I had to give me some flexibility so I could leave before it got dark initially. So I'd leave, midday, ride home, and then work from home in the evening. But
Yeah. Was it ever, I mean, it had to have been demoralizing, just all the extra stuff that you have to do just to get to work, like did it get you down?
oh yeah, yep, yeah. I'm looking at everyone else at the office gets to hop in a car and drive to work, and why am I the one that has to? It's November, it's raining, it's snowing, and I have to be out here on a bike. What gives? Um, but it didn't take too long for it to turn around though. Like I said, I made it through that winter. Definitely some dark times during that winter, physically and emotionally. Um, but that next spring is when I really started, getting the hang of it and riding more for fun.
What do you think the tipping point was? Is there anything in particular you can point to?
Um, you know, that group that I mentioned of colleagues was just unbelievably supportive. I won't forget, meeting them at 5 in the morning, and we go out and we get to the first big climb of the day, and they all, go flying up it, and I'm at the bottom, and they all wait at the top. And then, there's another time where, um, they went far up a climb and I got lost, and they came back to find me, And even though I'm throwing off their tempo and they're having to come find me and kind of take care of me and nurse me home, um, they kept encouraging me and just said, come back on Thursday, come back on Tuesday. Um, and they were just they drove me to come out and keep doing it. And I think that's really what did it is, being with that group of people that, pushed me and, accepted that I was going to be slower and that there were going to be challenges and they didn't care. They were happy to do it.
Yeah. I love that. So on your, I don't know if you want to call it a weight loss journey. I don't know if you were intentionally trying to lose weight, but I'm kind of curious to understand how the bike played a role in a healthier lifestyle. I mean, did you start riding and then realize, hey, I like this, I like feeling well, and that, health begets health, it's like it just kind of feeds on itself? Or what was your story with that part of the journey?
A lot of it, I didn't think too much about it. A lot of the weight came off just because I was riding so much. It was about the next year that I ended up leaving that job and went to another one where I had a 12-mile commute each way. And so now I'm doing, 25 miles a day, through rain and snow and, with all my work gear. And it didn't take long for, pounds to start coming off. It wasn't until later down the road when I started doing more, dabbling in some races, doing some longer events that, I realized what a difference losing weight would make and, actively pursued it. So I got down probably just to 260 or so, just naturally, and then, started working out to get down beyond that. But yeah, definitely.
I was wondering if you
felt
did
better.
anything else, like if you included diet and other exercises, into that. So yeah, it's one of those things
Yeah.
where kind of the bikes and cycling and fitness was your entry point, and then it has a tendency to spread. You're like, oh, I want more of this, and I'm going to add
Yep.
this to the equation. I'm going to add that to the equation, and then before you know it, you're looking fine, fit, and riding across the Tour Divide, man. I mean, it's an amazing
Yeah.
story. It really is. Like, if you think about it, from 2009, being legally blind, over 300 pounds, struggling to do a 3-mile ride to work with blindness, and then we're 15 years later, and you
Yep.
rode across the Tour Divide. I mean, that is incredible human achievement. I mean, I've got goosebumps just thinking about that. So yeah, again, just congratulations to you, man. That's
Thank
so
you.
fucking rad, and I love that you did that. I love that you didn't allow this and don't allow this to be a determined, the end of the road, right? Like it
Yeah.
really, in a lot of ways, it sounds like it was the beginning of a whole new trajectory in your life, and it's truly incredible. So kudos to you, man. Absolutely impressive.
Thanks. I just like to ride my bike.
Cool. Yeah, you came on the right podcast. That is the one and only right answer on the
Yeah.
podcast. We just like to ride our bike. It just happens that you could do it for a long way if you want to.
Right. Yep.
Well, cool, man. Let's talk about the progression of your cycling quote unquote quote career. So you said you did a century. What are some other events maybe that kind of stand out and are worth mentioning?
Sure. My first kind of big multi-day ride was a charity ride in Massachusetts called the Pan Mass Challenge. It's 2 days, 200 miles. Um, and then next was a ride called the Harpoon Brewery to Brewery, which started at the Harpoon Brewery in Boston, Mass, and did 148 miles to I forget town. It's a town up in Vermont where the other brewery is. So it's a 1 day, 148 miles that had a minimum speed of 16 miles an hour through the hills. Um, and then I started getting, and that was, I was largely riding road, um, because it was, well, obviously, if you can't see well, road is a lot safer option. Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, there were some paths behind my house that led over to the office. So I started riding them. I picked up an old mountain bike off of Craigslist for a couple $100, decided to start trying it, and crashed a bunch, but had fun and kept doing it. Um, and so I started getting more and more into off-road riding and started doing some, longer distance mountain bike events. And then for the 10-year anniversary of being declared blind, I decided to do the Leadville 100. Um, and then did decide that I did it. I got my buckle
Oh, nice.
with less than 3 minutes to spare.
Oh,
And
hell
then
yes.
yeah. Um, and that was fun because I can't read the GPS. I can't read the time on the GPS. So I had no idea. So I was just riding as hard as I could and made it across the line. And it wasn't until my friend that was out there to crew for me came bounding out of the crowd to tell me I did it that I knew I got my buckle. So that was fun.
Amazing.
Then I
Wow.
decided that, I could do it better. So I kind of got obsessed with that. And for the last 4 years, I've done it, over and over again.
Yeah,
Um,
you did it every year from 2019 to 2023, minus COVID year, obviously. Um, and then we just had Leadville this past weekend. I'm assuming you didn't take part in Leadville this year.
no, it's unfortunate. I did the 48-day training camp at altitude. That would have been a great way to get fit for Leadville, but um,
Yeah.
no, there's only so much I can get away with. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so something had to slip, and unfortunately, it was Leadville this year.
Was it hard not to be at the lineup this year? Or did you feel like you'd earned a year off?
I miss it, and I've made a lot of friends out there. There's a lot of people. It's a great event. I absolutely miss being out there. Um, I feel like every year I've done it, I felt like I can do it better, and I still feel that way. So it's also from the personal side. I wish, I had that opportunity.
Yeah.
Um, but I can't complain.
Be back next year?
Maybe, maybe. I don't know.
We'll see. Well,
Yeah.
4 years at Leadville. I mean, Leadville is no joke. I think, without question, hardest mountain bike race in the world. Mountain biking is exactly my specialty, but I used to be a hardcore mountain biker, and it's definitely up there. And Tour Divide is considered to be the hardest, or up there at least. I mean, you got Silk Road, and I don't know which one's actually harder, but it's in the top three for sure. So you're taking on some of the biggest challenges in multi-disciplines of cycling, which is just amazing. For able-bodied people, I mean, for anybody, it is period, just impressive. When did you get into bikepacking, man? How did you even hear about bikepacking? When did you get into it?
Well, that's a good question. Um, I guess over the last year or two, um, I didn't have a lot of experience. I've done a lot of overnights, mostly as training runs for Tour Divide. Tour Divide was really my first, multi-day bikepacking trip.
No.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Are you say that again? Tour Divide was your, or I'll say it. Tour Divide was your first multi-day bikepacking trip.
Yeah, yeah.
Holy crap. All right. I got more
Um,
questions, but I'm going to put them on pause
all
right
right.
now and let you finish.
So I had done other journeys along the way. I mentioned road trip. I used to do 5 to 7 day kayak trip every year,
Okay.
which is very similar. Like, you're packing very similarly. You can bring a lot more in a boat than you can in a bike. But the same idea. I've always, any sort of journey has always, tickled my imagination. And so that's, part of what Tour Divide, why it got stuck in my head was, it's a journey on a bike. Um,
So how much, that's a good question. Maybe, how much camping and like outdoor experience did you have before Tour Divide?
a ton. So I grew up doing Boy Scouts and other outdoor stuff. When I was in my 20s, I did a lot of wilderness survival, living with the earth sort of things. go out into the woods with nothing but a knife and make shelter and try to survive out there, that sort of stuff.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I had a
Real
fair
wilderness
bit of,
survival.
yeah. So I had a fair bit of experience doing that.
Okay. Yeah. And that's huge. That, that outdoor competency is exactly what you need for the Tour Divide. So you felt like, yeah, you kind of had that in the bag, so to speak, or in your personal like arsenal of your outdoor
Yeah.
toolkit.
Yeah. Definitely experience I could draw back on. It's been a while since I've done a lot of that stuff. And I'm from New England, and the terrain environment and ecosystems out in the Rockies are very, very different. But certainly I did have that experience to fall back on.
Yeah. I think, yeah, just that outdoor competency, once you have it, you have it. I think, I grew up in the Boy
Yeah.
Scouts too, and
Nice.
had similar, I was an Eagle Scout by the age of 14.
Wow. Nice.
I was the second youngest in the state of Texas at the time. So that's one of my only claims to fame.
Wow.
Uh,
Congrats. That's impressive.
yeah. It was pretty cool. They flew a flag over the state capitol the day I got my Eagle Scout, and they sent it to me. So I have this flag
Wow.
that, yeah, it was pretty neat. So it was kind of
It's really cool.
a cool deal. And then I went on to actually lead Boy Scout expeditions in my early 20s and took other kids into outdoor and wild wilderness experience. And I think, it all just built on itself. And now I lead bikepacking trips and everything. But yeah, a great introduction to the outdoors. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers is just being comfortable outdoors, being
Yeah.
comfortable and competent to be able to handle a multitude of situations, whether mechanicals or weather, wildlife, tents, cooking. There's so much
Yeah.
variety that goes into the recipe of bikepacking, and having that in your wheelhouse, I think, is very helpful. It's a big barrier
Yeah.
that you're removing.
Yeah. And helps, give you some flexibility too. There are nights where, I'm aiming for a hotel somewhere, and because of road conditions or, mechanicals, couldn't make it. So I had to throw a tent up somewhere. And, if you're prepared, you have the right gear, you have the right mindset, it's not a big deal. It's
Yeah.
certainly nice to be in a hotel.
So how did when did you decide to do the Tour Divide? And how did you hear about that one, if you remember?
Well, like so many people out there, it was the movie, Ride the Divide. I saw that, right after it came out, and I've probably watched that 2 dozen times. That's the movie I watch before the Leadville every year when I'm in my tapers. I'd pull that out and watch it.
Yeah.
Um, but I always thought, in that movie there were 12 people that did it, and it was before things like, the satellite communications and the GPSs that we have now. And so I just had in my head that, it it fascinated me, but it was never something I'd be able to do because I can't read the paper maps. And with only 12 people out there, something goes wrong, you're completely on your own. So, honestly, when I had the sabbatical this year, I initially was going to ride cross country, from West Coast to East Coast.
On the road. Because there's
Yep.
two routes now. There's the Trans America and then the Nonstop Bike US, I believe it's called, that prioritizes off pavement riding. But you were thinking about doing
Oh, nice. Yep.
the paved version, yeah.
Yep.
Which makes sense. Again, no ruts, no potholes, no mud, all that kind of stuff. So it makes sense.
Yeah. Um, but it was a much longer route. It was the best route I could find that would end back in this area was about 4,200 miles. And yeah, that'd be pushing over 100 miles a day average, which means I'm, not as much, it's not a race, it's a tour. And I'd be out there, trying to push it to make it across. And it would be 4,200 miles of, hoping that the next driver that comes along isn't texting and is paying attention and sees me.
Yeah.
And so, that was stressing me out. And I forgot what happened. I forgot why I started looking into it. But when I realized, Um, nowadays there's 200 to 250 people doing the Tour Divide, just from the Grand Depart, and then on the GDMBR, there's a ton of people going back and forth all day. So the chances that if something happened to you and you couldn't get help, there's a pretty good chance that someone will come along at least that day and find you on the side
Mm-hmm.
road. And then things like the Garmin device that has a SOS button means that if something happened and I'm off my bike on the side of a cliff somewhere, I can press that and someone will come find me. Um, that all help reassure that it's a little bit more of a safer option than it had to have been. And then being able to rely on, there's some pretty detailed routes with points of interest now, that people have put together, and I can see that in my GPS. And so all of a sudden, I had an option for navigation. I felt a little more safe. My family felt a little bit more safe about me going out there. And honestly, it's just when I realized that a lot of those barriers had been dropped, I got really excited about doing it. Um,
So
so
when did that happen? Like, when did you make the decision, I'm going to race Tour Divide in 2024?
November of last year. So
November 2023.
yeah, so 8 months before.
Yeah, not very long. All right. So
Uh,
in November of 2023, where, paint us a picture of like how competent of a cyclist are you? How much are you riding? How much mountain biking and trail riding are you doing? Like, give us a snapshot into where you're at in November of 2023.
um, I felt relatively confident. So we talked about Leadville. I've been training for that pretty much around the calendar for years, and that's all endurance focused training, which would apply to Tour Divide. So I feel like I had a pretty good base, although after the race in August, I stopped training. So I had a few month gap there. Um, as far as off road, I felt pretty good about it. It's certainly more of a challenge for me because of vision. But I I I these days I tend to do more gravel, mixed terrain, mountain biking, XC riding, um, and some cyclocross too. So I dabble in cyclocross. So I tend to be more off road than on these days.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you can do 4 Leadvilles from a technical aspect, you have to feel like, check that box, right? And then
Yeah.
it just comes down to the endurance of being out on the Tour Divide for over a month, and how do you pack your gear and all that kind of stuff. But from a technical and fitness perspective, you were feeling fairly competent.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly needed to, like, one of the first things I did was turn training back on and start working with a coach to you know with only 8 months to go, to try to get
Yeah.
as good a shape as I could get. I'm not sure I can ever get ready for this.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sure
I
some of
don't
the guys
think
you talk to have timed their training and peaked, but yeah, I mean, for me,
yeah, but you can't recreate even even if you're doing like 13 or 14 days, you just can't recreate that.
yeah,
Nobody's going to
yeah,
go and push themselves that hard outside of doing something like this for 13 or 14 days. And so it's always a question mark for anybody, I think, whenever you do one of these. So I wanted to talk about your training. What did your training look like? Who's your coach?
So I'm using Chris Komarski from QT2 Systems, in cycling and formula. So he took over from my former coach who for personal reasons had to leave. And he did a just phenomenal job working with me. We focused a lot on you know zone one training, just getting out and doing endurance focused things, some more spirited stuff, interval training during the week and then the weekends. I think back in December we started with an hour and a half on one day and 2 hours the next day, and then that built up to doing 8 to 10 hours each day on the weekends.
Wow.
before leaving for Tour Divide. Yeah. And then trying to build in a lot more back-to-back efforts. So, a lot of times there'd be a 3-day block. If I could get time on Friday to do, 8 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. So trying to do repeated long duration leading up to it.
How are you able to, for 8, that's the thing about Tour Divide is it's not just the time that you're out there, but it's all the time that you're preparing before. And as you mentioned, you have a job, you have a wife, you have a kid. You said one kid, right? A son?
Yep.
And
One son.
yeah. So, I mean, how are you also including 8 to 10 multi-day, how did you actually train? Like it's a huge balancing act, it seems like.
Yeah. Yep. So my work is very flexible. So I was able to do things like, work earlier in the morning and get out in the afternoon for, an hour, hour and a half, during the week. And then, we also have a summer Friday program. So if you condense your work week, worked a little bit more during the week, Friday afternoons, you can take time off. So, that would help. And then I run a kids mountain bike or a youth XC mountain bike team. And there's 6 races in the spring around New England. And a lot of them are, a 2 to 3 hour drive from where we live. And the race would be on Sundays. So what I'd do is I would ride out there on Saturday, and make that part of the thing. So, if there were local campgrounds or, other options, I would, make it a bikepacking weekend. So I'd leave Saturday morning, ride out, camp overnight, and then get up and work with the team at the race day on Sunday.
Yeah.
So basically,
Man.
I guess trying to integrate it with life, anywhere you can.
But it's a lot of work, man. Being able to be present in your home life, your work life, and training. When you started training, when you were going through this process of riding 8, 10-hour days, multi-days back to back, was that like energizing you? Were you like, okay, this is cool, I want to be doing this? Or was it like, oh crap, this isn't exactly what I was thinking? Like, how did you internalize that process?
It depended. There's times, I was so excited about doing Tour Divide that most of the time I was really into it, and I was excited to be out there practicing, because I'm also, I'm not just typically not just going out for an 8-hour ride. I'm going for an overnight or something. I'm trying to do more than just the physical training. I'm trying to test gear. I'm trying to test how I pack things. Work on meal planning, things like that. So that was all really exciting. But then there are, of course, days where it was just drudgery and, you don't want to get up and go for a ride because it's raining or it's crappy or it's hot or it's, some other reason, or you're just tired. But, you got to do it. If you don't, then, it's just going to make it harder when you actually get out there.
Yeah, exactly. Suffer now so you suffer less later.
Yep.
Pick where you want to suffer.
Yep. And, where I could, there's a couple of friends that went out. We did test overnights where, we'd ride out to a campground, wherever, down in Connecticut or somewhere, and do an overnight together, come back next day. And that was a great way to get training in, with someone else, plus work on gear. It made the whole thing kind of fun.
Yeah. I guess it's worth touching on. What were your goals? We're talking about your training. What were you training for? Like, what was your goal for the Tour Divide?
Well, my goal was, I thought 30 to 35 days was realistic. I was optimistic at 27 days.
Okay. So that's what you were training for. Yeah. Just a little bit. That's all right.
Yeah.
You made it a little more adventurous. There's nothing wrong with that. What about the Tour Divide? You're obviously excited. It's obvious that you were jazzed up. You were excited about this idea. You were motivated. What about the Tour Divide gave you trepidation? What kind of kept you awake at night leading up to it?
bears.
Yeah, fair.
I was convinced I was going to be eaten by a bear in the first couple of days. Um, just the nonstop nature of it. Like, okay, so I go out and do training hour days of, 8 or 10 hours a day for 2 or 3 days. But, my plan initially was to do 14-hour days. And at the end of that, get up and do that again the next day and the next day and the next day for, a month. Um, it's I don't, like I said, I don't know there's any way you can train for that. And not knowing my body, not knowing myself, how I mentally would respond to that, um, that was definitely a big concern.
Yeah. Mentally and physically, just overall, like how you would respond to that is just a big question mark.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I, like I said, I'd done some like week-long trips, kayaking, things like that before, but, I'd never done anything more than overnight bike packing. And, um, I'd certainly never done anything that was this long duration. Um,
Man, so we're gonna, I guess this is a good time to bring it up, but you filmed your whole Tour Divide experience and we're posting the videos in real time. It seems like I want to get into some of that with you, but because of that, I was able to, I wasn't able to watch all of them. I started at the end just to kind of like, I don't know, get to know you a little bit. But then like I started over and started from the very beginning, and I'm gonna finish it. I haven't yet, but anyway, the point is like there was this one point I remember in your video where you had started the day and you were starting on a brand new map. You were on map number 3, and a 3 out of 5, right? Is that right?
seven, I think,
7.
total. Yeah.
Okay, that's sorry. 3 out of 7. And you were only like 628 miles into the thing, and you were excited about this new map. But I internalized, I was like, man, but like I was about to say, oh, and you've already passed the 2,000 mile marker. Oh wait, no, you haven't. You're still like 2,100 and some change away. And I one thing I liked about following and I've enjoyed about following your journey is because, I do, and I think a lot of media does have a tendency to focus on the people who are doing it the fastest, right? It's exciting. But yours gave me a really good insight into what it would be like, more like if I went out and did it. It's like, okay, you're gonna be out here a while, and
Yeah.
it felt daunting. It felt
Yeah.
really big. So I can only imagine what it was like for you to be out there, you're 13 days in, 628 miles in, and you still have 2,000 something miles to go and 4 more maps to go.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I think if you try to think about it, that, I'm riding my bike 2,700 miles from Canada to Mexico. That's insane. There's no way. There's no, I don't believe anyone can do that.
Yeah.
It sounds, totally unreasonable. Um, but if you're thinking, well, I get up today and I've got 80 miles to the next campsite or the next, hotel or whatever it is. And along the way, we're going to stop here for, to pick up food, and we're going to stop here to filter water. Um, it's a lot more manageable. So you know, when you're looking at that map and saying, I'm so far in, I had absolutely no idea how far in I was at any point.
Yeah.
At some point, someone would text me and be like, "You just broke 1,000 miles," and that's awesome. But yeah, it didn't feel like 1,000 miles. It didn't feel like I still had another 1,600 to go. It was
Super.
just day by day.
Yeah, that's super smart. And I had that when I was watching your video, I had that same conversation with myself. I was like, "Oh, you can't think about it. You cannot think about that there's 2,000 miles left, because you'd already been through so much by 628 miles. It's like, if you start thinking about 2,000 more miles of that, that is a nail in the coffin, I feel like.
Yeah.
And so, the first bike packing race I ever did, the race director, Billy Rice, said, get granular. When things are hard, look at the rock right in front of your tire. Like, focus on the here and the now. Can I do one more pedal stroke? Can I make it to that sign up there? And I've used that tool forever. And it's when you start thinking about the future that your mental state can shift to the negative and it'll set in with you. But if you can just, what I like to say is be here now. Be here now and really be present in the moment. But it's got to be hard to do over 47 days. You know?
Yeah, I still can't believe it. But yeah, I mean, eventually you get into a routine, right? Where you're just getting up in the morning, you're looking at that day, and it just, the idea that you're on a journey. Like when I was down in New Mexico, I would think back to Alberta and Montana, and it felt like a different trip at some point in my past. I felt like the trip I'm on now couldn't have been more than a week long. That must have been some other time. And the same thing looking forward. I think, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like there's so many times there where, on some like the hike a bike sections where it's just, going shade section to shade section. Where you just, if I can make it up to that tree up there and then go from there. But then the inverse is true too, where, you're stuck on some muddy, horrible climb and it's the wind and the rain are coming down and you're miserable. Just remembering that this too shall pass. And, there will be a time when we're not doing this anymore, where we will be back on the bike and we'll be riding and it'll be sunny and it'll be happy. So it's, using both sides of that coin.
That is such a great point. Such a great point. Sometimes you don't want to be here now, and it's important to flip that. And so it really, bikepacking is just a series of mental gymnastics until you get to the finish line. That's all you're doing is tricking your brain. Be like, well, maybe not trick. It is, it's true.
No,
like sometimes you do want to be
yeah.
here now, and sometimes you want to remember that it won't always be bad. The hills don't last forever. The cold doesn't last forever. The sun will come up. All those things,
Yep.
You brought up another interesting thought is your comfortability out on the trail and how, at some point, this is just what I'm doing. I'm waking up today in a campsite. I'm going 80 miles to here. I'm, pooping in the woods and I'm looking for water, and that's just what I'm doing. How long did it take for you to reach a level of comfortability out there?
That's a good question. I feel like the first few days are so like the whole tour is front loaded with a lot of challenges. The first day, you're doing single track, you're doing a lot of rolling hills, you're doing there's Elk Pass, which is which was a ton of hike a bike and went on forever. Day 2 is Coco Claim and day 3 is the wall. So much that was just, biting off chunks of challenge. It was, get over this pass. It was get over that. It's get to the next thing. It was really much more in the moment. Like, I think the routine just came along. Like it wasn't something I like sought out. And I think it just happened at some point where, now I think, as those individual challenges lessened, and it became more just grinding out to miles, by that point, you'd already been through so much, and it is at that point just what you're doing is getting up and looking for the next, looking at what the day will be like.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about your kit for the Divide from watching you on YouTube. By the way, it's fun to get to talk to you because I feel like I already know you. Now I know what what other people experience when they come on the show. If they listen to it, they're like, "Hey, I feel like I already know you." But I've been watching you. I've been binge watching you for like the last 2 days. So now it's I've just you're still on my computer screen. It's just now I'm talking to you in real time instead of rooting for you while I'm watching. But you were loaded down. Not only that, but like you were loaded down, but also like your kit seemed super dialed. Like you had a very dialed bikepacking rig, it seems like to me, with a lot of stuff on it. And I'm curious, did you pack for being out there that long? Was that part of your strategy? You talked about it earlier. wilderness preparedness. Like if I don't make this resupply point, I can camp. So was that a strategic move on your part to just have everything you need?
Yeah. Go back to the Boy Scout, be prepared. I
Absolutely.
wanted to make sure that I had, you know, part of it is to like, I wanted to have things like some certain, I guess, luxuries. But as I get older, they seem less like luxuries, but things like a tent, a sleeping pad, a pillow. Um, I
A
wasn't willing
chair.
to go out there. Well, yeah, chair. Yep.
I
Um, yep.
I liked it because it was like you were like almost 2 weeks in and you finally pulled it out for the first time. You're like, this stupid chair I've been lugging around
I
for
know.
however many days.
It,
I bet it felt
yep.
good to sit in it though.
Yeah, but not as good as as not having it would have been.
Yeah.
Um, but part of it was like I didn't want to go up into the high mountain Rockies in a bivy sack. I knew there were going to be times where the weather would be bad or I'd be in bear country and just I wanted to have things like a tent. Um, and a lot of it was based off of the overnight stuff I had done around home and training. And I think that's where I like I said I brought way too much stuff. But on an overnight, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's in an overnight where I'm not pushing a bike up a giant pass covered in rocks. Um, so yeah, and I'm a bit of a geek nerd, and I research everything 10 ways from Sunday. So um, you know, I was very specific about the items I got and what they were for, and why I chose those specific things. Which tent, which pack, which all of that stuff. Um, I just I think in the end, I didn't need you know two changes of clothing. I didn't need the chair. I didn't need a lot of that stuff. And if you're watching the videos, you see that at some point the rack broke, and I had to switch to from my a fairly sizable trunk bag with two big panniers, which were oversized, so I could have more food or capacity for food and water, but ended up meaning I brought more stuff. I had to switch to a traditional seat pack. I think it was 16 liters,
Mhm.
and ended up having to go through everything I brought and say, is this absolutely necessary or can it go home? And I sent a box home that weighed almost 10 pounds.
Yeah.
Um,
It looked heavy. I did see that episode. It looked heavy.
yeah, and it was so much better after that. There's so much there that I just didn't need. And if I were to do this sort of thing over again, just it's amazing how little you need out there. And of course, the
Yeah.
standards drop because you're dirty and your clothes are dirty, and yeah,
You're becoming a more feral human day by
yeah,
day. You're like, I don't
exactly,
need any of this crap.
exactly, yep.
What
And
is, oh, go ahead.
and I'm sure anyone that you meet who isn't part of the Tour Divide is God, I must have reeked and been really gross, but um,
I bet everyone
it
on that route is used to it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there anything that you didn't bring that you wish that you had?
Um, I only brought one means of water filtering. My water filter was great, but there were some places there where um, I think a secondary backup would have been good. So meaning that, once you filter the water, if you're filtering it from a cow pasture, the water filters are only so good, and having a SteriPen or pills or something to you know to back that up.
Mm.
Um, um, I have a much smaller cook kit. I wish I had had that, but that's instead of the one I have. The one I brought is it's great because you can actually cook in it. You can adjust the flame, and it's all great. It's also really efficient. And I was worried about availability of fuel.
Yeah.
Turns out that's not a big concern. Pretty much anywhere along the route you can find butane. Um, so I wish I had brought something smaller. but that's, that's not something I forgot. Um, Other than that, there wasn't really anything. I mean, there's stuff I wish I had left, but there wasn't a lot that I wish I had brought with.
Yeah. What about your decision to film your experience? Bro, I mean, you carried a drone. I don't know what all camera equipment you have, but I wanted to kind of unpack that part of your experience because, yeah, I know as a content creator, trying to capture an experience like this is a whole nother job. Extra gear, extra time to set up equipment, charge
Yeah,
batteries, upload stuff. I mean, it's yeah. So what was your why for wanting to capture it?
yeah. Um, so first and foremost, we haven't talked about this, but I've done the whole thing was a the whole adventure was a fundraiser for Foundation Fighting Blindness to raise, funds and awareness for blindness research. Um, and so for me, the video is really a way to help drive that awareness.
Hmm.
Um, I felt like if I go out there and I just do this on my own, um, it's kind of it makes it just my thing. Versus, if I could video it, then, I'm sharing it with a community, and hopefully that again all comes back to, raising funds and awareness.
Yeah.
Um, I tend to be someone who likes to take photos and videos and not be in them. So this whole thing was very much, out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Um, but I felt like in the end, also for personal reasons, being able to look back on it, um, I don't know if I'll ever get to do anything like this again. And I want to have that record.
Yeah.
So for me, for those two reasons, it was worth, bringing the extra gear and spending extra time. It is time consuming to, like I said, just like a drone shot, it'll take you 20 minutes to get a 3 second shot. Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, that 3 second shot is, out in this amazing wilderness, these amazing vistas, it's worth that time.
Yeah, that was something pretty unique about your experience because I'm not, it's probably happened and I'm just not aware of it, but I'm not aware of anybody who's raced the Tour Divide and captured their experience, especially with like a drone and stuff. Like we had Doozer that was out there this year, and he had his GoPro, but he didn't bring his drone, but he's toured it with a drone, so you can like kind of
Yeah.
get it. But like during the actual race, it's not very common that you get that kind of a peek into the race and some of the other riders and stuff because most people just aren't taking the time to set up the shots and to carry all that extra gear. So I was wondering what gear you brought with you. Like I'm wondering if you brought a computer so you could upload. Like I am
Yeah.
curious as a content creator. I am curious.
Um, yeah, so I didn't bring a computer. I brought a iPad mini, um, and my iPhone, and then a GoPro Hero 12 with a little selfie stick tripod mount. And then the drone is a DJI Mini Pro 4.
Ooh, you got
And
the
that's it.
4. I still
Yeah.
got the 3. I mean, there's so many steps here. Like, not only are you, yeah, carrying the equipment, charging the batteries, setting up the
Yeah.
shots, riding past the camera, going back to get it, like all of that. But you are. Is it you? Are you the person who is editing the film, like these daily clips? Because you put
No,
out like a video every 2 to 3 days, or no, it wasn't you. So what was your
no.
workflow for that?
So I'm fortunate to have two friends who are very interested in video editing and were able to help out. And so, anytime I got to somewhere that had Wi-Fi, first thing I did was download everything off I would use the phone to download everything off my camera and start that syncing. And then I would use the iPad to grab everything off the drone and start that syncing. And hopefully all those videos would sync up to cloud before I left the Wi-Fi again. At some point, you're pulling into a hotel late at night and you're leaving early in the morning. It didn't always happen. But then they would watch sort of footage to get uploaded in the cloud, and then they would pull it down and they do all the video editing and make the big productions.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
that's cool.
they did an awesome job.
If you were editing this and publishing it en route, I was
No
gonna
way.
I was gonna take whatever course you were selling, because I mean, I can't. It's so much. I mean, it's hard. Again,
Yeah.
it is so challenging just to capture it. I mean, I'm in content creation. I often go bike packing, and I'm like, I don't. There's so much extra that goes into, like, because you can't just turn on the camera once. You got to be doing it throughout the whole
Yeah.
day, so you have a through line, a storyline. If you miss something, it's gone. You don't ever get it back, and so it's a whole nother job. And
Yeah.
it's challenging for me to want to be motivated enough to go through that. So just capturing it is one job, and then producing something with it is a lot of work on top of all that. So it's nice to hear you had some help. And it was
Yeah.
cool to be able to, I didn't unfortunately follow along in real time, but they were pumping out those videos, had a pretty quick turnaround, it seemed like.
Yeah. They were doing a great job. You know, it helped having two of them. I think one was on vacation for a little while and the other one covered. And so they were tag teaming and, collaborating to get it all done. But yeah, they've done an awesome job. And there's still a couple more to come. I think the last one, I still have another couple hundred miles to get to the border. So stay tuned.
All right, I'm staying tuned.
Yeah.
I guess it's worth mentioning your like Instagram and YouTube is blind guy biking. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and
You get
website
to
and everything like that. So, yeah.
yep. blindguybiking.org. Yep.
Boom. So y'all can go check them out if you're wanting a little bit more Chris after this episode. So let's talk about some of the challenges that you experienced on the Tour Divide with your blindness. Like, break it down for, us, help us understand what challenges you were facing on a day by day, minute to minute basis. Like, how did they present themselves during your ride?
Yeah. I think the first thing was I decided really early on that although I do some night riding around home on trails I know, riding at night with a dynamo hub, which means, if you're riding slowly, you're not, there's no light. Because the faster you ride, the more light you have. Um, on a fully loaded bike and sometimes in questionable situations just was too much. So very quickly, my plans of riding, 14 hours a day, got scaled back a bit because just riding at night just wasn't a great idea. And then,
So you went into the Tour Divide with the thought that you would try to do some night miles.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was never going to do the sleeping for 2 hours a night. I knew I was going to be
Right.
closer to a tour than that. But I did intend to ride more of the day than I ended up doing. The only time I ended up riding after day two at night was the very last day, which I was doing 123 miles from Silver City to the border in the desert, and I wanted to make sure I could take advantage of the cool while I had it. So I did leave before dawn, and that reminded me, what a challenge it was. I'm riding through an unknown city with questionable lights, trying to navigate, and wasn't, I did it, but it was slow and it wasn't ideal.
Yeah.
Beyond that, being able to see what was in the trail. So, there's a lot of something that we don't have in New England. We have a lot of rocks, we have a lot of roots, we have a lot of mud, but we don't have a lot of erosion ruts, and we don't have a lot of mud that freezes into rutted roads. And so it was actually on a pre-ride the day before the Tour Divide started. I was out in a course and didn't see an erosion rut. My tire got stuck in it. I went over to handlebars. I ended up with My chin was all cut up, my arm was all cut up, my pinky fingers got caught up in the handlebars and bent around and were in bad shape. And, that kind of illustrated that I didn't see the rut in time.
Hmm.
There's not a lot of contrast, especially in certain lighting conditions. Um, and so, that was a real challenge. Anytime that the road tipped down and, you do this giant climb and you're like, all right, I finally get to go descend. That's when it got tough, because of those ruts. Similarly, embedded rocks. Back home, we have a lot of granite, which is gray, and we have a lot of, earthy, loamy trails, which are brown. And so you can see the rocks because they're a different color. A lot of the places on the route, it's the same base material that's making the embedded rocks and the dirt around it. So everything's kind of the same color. And so there wasn't a lot of contrast. And, there's a lot of places where I had to go very slow or even walk on the descents because I just didn't feel comfortable letting the bike run. So those were a couple of like just, the logistics of riding was, there's a lot of points where, someone else would be, ripping down a trail and I'm poking along very slowly, or even walking because I couldn't see what was coming at me. And then the other was the logistics. Um,
Yeah, navigating.
because I can't read the signs. And, if a resupply is a gas station, that's pretty obvious. It's bright. There's gas pumps. There's giant signs, and you say, okay, if I go in there, I know I'm going to find, candy and pies. Um, but that's not what a lot of the resupply options are along the route. There's a lot of places that are, I think in one place, Warm River, there's a mercantile that I rode right by and had no idea it was even an option. And that, it can get you into trouble. That particular day ended up being a 120-mile day that I hadn't had a resupply since Helena, Montana, and I got down to Lima. I hadn't had any food for, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 hours, which, typically I'm constantly eating when I'm on the bike.
Yeah.
Cliff bars and candy bars, something is, it's, constantly eating. So to be without food, wasn't great and started to bonk as I came to Lima. And it's entirely because, there's a couple of resupplies out there that I just rode right by, and had no idea.
Oh, wow.
So that was a lesson I had to learn is, I need to be very careful and deliberate about, where things are, and use things like the point of interest maps on the phone, um, to try to figure out where I need to get to and, be aware of where I am against that, as I went through the day.
Was that, I know there was a section in the video where you went like 4 days without a resupply, and so you were just living off your bike essentially. Was that that experience that you just mentioned at the tail end of that 4 days? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause that
Wow.
was, so I resupplied in Helena. We stayed there overnight. And then the next, big town is Butte, Montana. And I had intended to stay there overnight, but I ended up leaving and didn't think about resupplying as I rolled out of town and then didn't realize that, from there, there's a mountain pass. And the next night, I think I stayed in a cow pasture. And then I think after that was, I think that was Fleecer Ridge was right after that. And then the resupply that I missed in Warm River, I wild camped again and then headed down towards Lima. So yeah, so there's nothing out there. I guess there was stuff out there. I just didn't realize it. Um, yeah,
Oh man, that sucks.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's so rough. I
Yep.
wanted to ask you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, that's good.
All right. Uh, there, you had a low point. I'm sure you had many low points throughout the time you were out there, but the one that I've seen was in, so I just put in my notes, somewhere in Montana, you started to get concerned that you wouldn't be able to finish. And in the video, you're quite emotional. It's obviously weighing heavy on you. So I wanted you to speak to that, like what was going on that made you feel like for the first time you might not be able to finish this thing.
Yeah, it's just it was the pace was so much slower. You know, I had gone into this thinking, 100 miles a day was not a problem. I probably do like I figured, okay, if I can do a 10-mile-an-hour average and I could be on my bike for 10 hours, then that's 100 miles and no big deal. And I should be able to do more than that because 10 mile an hour isn't that fast, and 10 hours a day is there's more daylight than that. So I should be able that was a low ball, and it turned out like I said, it was a lot slower both on the ups and the downs I expected, and I just was watching the days get away from me. I go out and think, okay, today we're going to do, I think every day I would look at the map and I would set a goal. So like a campsite or a town, whatever it is, that'd be the goal for the day. I would set a stretch goal that, if things are going well, maybe I'll roll right through that town and I'll get to this other campsite. And then, some contingencies that if things go sideways. And there's a bunch of times I was hitting those contingencies or only just making it to the goal. And, the terrain was a lot harder than I expected. I knew there was going to be a lot of climbing. I wasn't expecting as much hike a bike as there is. And I certainly wasn't expecting, to have as much trouble with the descent as I did. And so that just made the pace slower. And next thing you know, I'm out here. I've got one shot at this. I know there's some people that have opportunities to do this 4 or 5 times, but I don't expect I'll be able to be out there again. And all of a sudden I'm looking at the days and I'm doing the math and realizing at this pace, or even if I pick it up a little bit, I just don't have the time to get down there. And that sucked. As we talked about, I was looking forward to this. I was optimistic. It was something I was excited about, and to be out there doing it, and not be able to finish it was really tough.
Yeah. I want to, so, I mean, I know I'm just watching on YouTube, so you can fill in any blanks that I might be missing, but you were riding with a guy, Rob, and y'all were like ping ponging and not always riding together, but you and Rob were often sharing a campsite together, and he was certainly a part of your, I think, story and journey on the Tour Divide this year. And I think, in the film it shows, or the video, it shows like you had this hard day in Montana, really struggling, and you also felt like you were kind of holding Rob up. So I think it was at that evening that you had a chat with Rob and you were like, hey buddy, I don't want to hold you up. Like, go do your race. I'll be good.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to watch. Like, that was a really emotional thing for you to say goodbye to your friend Rob, who had, been riding with you, and someone to keep you company, and maybe probably safer to be with somebody else. But you said the crazy thing, what really stood out to me in the video was you went from having this really low day, really emotional and feeling like you wouldn't be able to finish it, and that was really weighing on you, and you were holding your buddy Rob up, and so you decided to part ways with him to kind of remove yourself of like the emotional burden of feeling you're impeding his journey. And I'm like watching, I'm like, oh man, like this is going to be a tough slog, and I knew you finished, so I kind of knew how it ended, but I was like, oh, what's going to happen here? And you have like the most epic quote on your video, and you said, like, you just like, it was like, well, 1 second you're like emotional and sad, and then the next frame you come on and you're like, it's Tour Divide, it's 3:00 in the afternoon, and I'm just hanging out in a hotel room. What the fuck am I doing? And like, it's like a light lit up on your face, and your attitude switched, and your mood improved and you got out of the hotel room and you just got on your way. Can you talk about that experience? What happened behind the scenes?
You pretty much nailed it. Like I said, so Rob and I first started, we actually didn't know each other until day two. We just happened to be up on the same mountain pass together and ended up splitting a room. And then we kept, for the most part, pretty even pace. Like, I think at first both of us were, riding together, not riding together. If we go, if we split up, not a big deal. But then we got into a routine and we ended up really enjoying each other's company and riding the same pace. And then I just had a series of just really bad days of just, my descending was off and he kept waiting for me. And, I always knew that, I think he was concerned about me and my safety coming down these descents. So he would stop and wait. And I just, I knew he only had a certain amount of time. And, I was certainly holding him back at that point. We'd gone pretty evenly to now pretty skewed. And, for me, it was, I expected that this whole event would be very solitary. I expected the first day the pack would get stretched out and that would be the last time I saw people. And so it was great to have, his camaraderie and, to kind of be in it together and know that, there are times where if one of us ran out of water, the other one had some, things like that. Like we had each other's back. But it was apparent that, I was dragging him down and I didn't want to influence his ride anymore. And he was thinking the same thing, but didn't want to say it. So, when we got to Butte, we had that conversation at lunch and, we went over, got some stuff at the outdoor store and then he was on his way. And I went over to a Super 8 motel, got the cheapest room I could find in the basement, with the intention that, I just need to work through this. I'll have a night in a hotel. And then tomorrow it'll be a new race, a new chapter. And, I did the video updates and then got to work at all the things you do when you stop is uploading that footage, doing my laundry in the sink. Like anytime you stop out there, there's a lot to do. And got to work on that. And literally, like I said, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a bright, sunny, nice day. I'm supposed to be riding my bike and pushing myself and getting closer to Mexico. And instead, I'm sitting in this basement hotel washing my clothes. And that's like, I physically felt fine. Obviously emotionally, I was a wreck, but whatever. That's not an excuse to be sitting there, doing nothing. And yeah, it was kind of that epiphany of like, look, this is Tour Divide. This is not supposed to be easy. This is not supposed to be, a ride in the park, but I should be out there challenging myself, pushing myself, trying to get there. And if you're sitting in a hotel doing laundry at 3 p.m, that's not getting you any closer. And yeah, once that switch was flipped, and I couldn't wait to get out of that room. And I got my clothes to the point where I could put them back on again and packed up everything and got out of there. And went and had there's a climb right out of town. It was actually awesome. Got up to the top. There's amazing vistas. And then, I got some great drone footage going through this rolling hills and then found a nice little place to settle down for the night. And that was, really it was kind of like going back to, it was like a reset. That was how I intended to do it from the beginning. And I think, we got into touring mode with Rob and which was great. I don't regret it for a second. But it was kind of having that moment of like, I came out here to do a thing. I expected to be alone. It's the next chapter, let's go.
Man.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. I hope people will go back and watch your progress, your series on YouTube, because your whole demeanor changed. Like the light in your face was back. Like you went from, a very low place. And I just love how you flipped that switch. You made a decision and you left the hotel room that you just paid for and had mentally checked into. It's not just physically checked into, but mentally you're like, all right, I got a warm bed. I got a shower. I'm hanging out. And then you said, no, fuck this. I'm on the Tour Divide. Let's go. Amazing. Did you keep that steam for the rest of your journey? Did you, I know you had low points, I'm sure, but were you able to keep that same mental momentum throughout the rest of your journey, or did you have other challenging times where you thought about throwing in the towel?
Yeah. So when we got down to Colorado, Rob had run out of time and he was heading back home. And the Colorado section was awesome. I think that was my favorite of the whole thing. The scenery is amazing. The riding was great. There's a lot of fun places to stop and ride through. And so we got to Breckenridge, and there's a shuttle that goes from the hotel to the airport, and beyond Breckenridge, I knew we're getting down into some of the more challenging sections of the desert and New Mexico, and knew things were going to get tougher. And so, Rob, couldn't afford a story. So Rob and I ended up riding together again, and we went through Colorado together. And, nice. He's now tapping out and going home. And I'm looking and saying, okay, I've now had, however many days it was at that, 30 days or something. I've been out on a bikepacking trip, and it's been amazing. It's spectacular. And I'm now at a place where I can leave safely. And if I go forward, I'm on my own. There's no catching Rob again. There's no, that's ship sailing. And I knew from the time that we were apart, when I rode by, the resupplies, I know resources only get more scarce as you go further south. And so I was really worried that, maybe there's one place to get water that day and I didn't see it and I ride by it. What am I going to do? I feel like things could get pretty rough pretty fast. So it was really hard to keep going at that point. Because it was just such an easy, safe out. And I felt like I had accomplished a lot. Obviously I didn't finish what I came to do, but, that was a real roller coaster. And I gave myself an extra day there to try to work through it and figure it out. And in the end, I had support from, my family, from my friends, and from my workplace, which, gave me the time I needed to extend and finish it. And so I said, look, I'm in good physical health. There's no actual reason for me to tap out and head home other than fear of getting myself into trouble. I'm not injured. My knees are fine. My Achilles are fine. The bike's in great shape. There's absolutely no reason I can't continue. And so that's what, got me to get my head around to that place. That I felt like I could continue on.
Yeah. Amazing. You're a tough dude, man. You proved it to yourself. Stubborn, tough. It all equals the same thing sometimes, you got to the end of the Tour Divide one way or another, and that's no one can take that away from you. So obviously the Tour Divide comes with a slew of challenges. I mean, we could spend hours and hours just talking about all the challenges, but why don't we tie a happy bow on it and talk about some of your favorite things from your Tour Divide experience. So I'm just going to go through and list a few things, and I want to hear your favorites. So it might be hard to remember after 47 days. You had a lot of meals, but we'll just do our best. No one will know if you miss one. What was your favorite meal on the Tour Divide?
Boy, I don't know. Anywhere I could get, a double stack of pancakes with some eggs, like that did the trick for me.
A good solid breakfast.
Yeah, or anytime to get breakfast food. I mean, it is hard because there were so many. I'll tell you, my favorite meal that I cooked on my own was backpackers pad thai. I was calling it, with
Okay.
ramen, pre-cooked chicken, and peanut butter mixed in. Um,
No.
yeah, a little bit of
This
hot
is
sauce.
new. This is new. Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. So you can get, so I mean, one of the things out there is you're always looking for condiments anywhere you go, and one of the hotels had little packets of peanut butter, and so I
Okay.
grabbed those. Yeah, so ramen plus chicken plus peanut butter plus hot sauce, and worked out pretty good.
I am gonna have to believe you on that one, and maybe one day I'll get brave enough or hungry enough to try it. But it doesn't sound good. You also another one you did was ramen with tuna fish and mustard packets, I think.
Oh, it's terrible. It's horrible.
Okay,
But
that one's bad.
yeah, but you know what? It's what you got to eat, so you eat it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's got protein, it's got carbs, it's got salt. That's you do what you gotta do.
That was another tip that I picked up from you on your video was someone had gave you the tip of just eating a
Uh,
mustard packet. So
yep.
lots of sodium, small pouch. Did it work? Did you stick with
Oh
the
yeah,
mustard packets? You swear by those? Yeah, mustard packets.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's a different flavor than you're used to. Like you're eating a lot of candy, you're eating a lot of sugary stuff, and now you have this like vinegary, mustardy packet. Yeah, it worked out really well. The one trick though is something I'd never heard of before this was Dijonnaise, which is a mixture of mustard and mayonnaise. And I got some of
Ooh.
those packets by mistake. Um, it may be great on a burger or something, but when it's 100 degrees and you're in the heat and you're sweating and you
Mm.
want some something you're vinegary and mustardy, and you get Dijonnaise, it was not good. It was not
Oh,
good.
it sounded good. I was like,
Oh, not
but
when you're
now
not
I know.
expecting it.
That's so true. That's so true.
Yeah,
If you're expecting milk and you drink Diet Coke instead or something, it's like, oh,
yeah,
what did I just do? All
exactly.
right. Favorite campsite or
Uh,
hotel. You can insert a hotel if you want to. Favorite place you slept.
Red Meadow Lake, up
Oh,
in
you have a
up in
video of that
Montana.
one on your
Yeah.
yeah, on your YouTube channel. You did a bunch of drone shots around there. Yeah, tell
Yep.
people what that's like.
Oh, it's spectacular. It's up in, it was freezing cold, but it's up in Montana. It's up in, I think it's right next to Glacier National Park. So it's a very, very high altitude lake. The campsite was literally on the edge of the water, and you're surrounded by snow-covered mountain peaks on all sides. Um, it's just beautiful out there. I mean, it was down in the 20s when we woke up in the morning, and that wasn't great. But other than that, like the clear water, the views, it was beautiful. And then we met a
Yeah.
couple other people up there, um, and we had a great night, on the social side. Plus, it was just beautiful. Um, after that, I think it's either the Llama Ranch or Fresh Mountain Lodge. Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah. Two, all three of those are like highlights of the route. So I guess that's one good thing about going slow is you don't miss any of this. Well, you miss some resupply spots if
yeah,
you're struggling with being able to see, but you don't miss any of the yeah. I mean, you rode during the
yeah,
day,
yeah,
so you didn't miss any of the scenery. You
yep,
didn't miss any of the kind of the highlights of the route, kind of the legendary stops of the route. So that's got to be one of
exactly,
the bonuses. Yeah.
for sure.
What about a favorite shower?
Oh, um, gosh, probably the second night. We
Oh
so
wow, early on.
yeah. Well, a lot happened the first few days. Um, man, so that the second day is Coco Claim, and I started late, and I had stopped early, so I did Coco Claim, got over that, and then I had thought it was going to be 40 miles into Fernie, no big deal on roads, and the weather had been rough, but whatever. Um, I didn't know about, I think it's Sulphur Pass. So it's probably around 8 or 9 at night. I started climbing this pass, and this is when I learned that I didn't want to ride at dark. So it's raining. It's it's mud, it's peanut butter mud, but we're still able to ride out there alone, and darkness is falling, and finally get the climb goes on forever. Get to the top of it. The only other person I'd seen it ended up being Rob. We didn't know each other at that time, but I passed him at some point, and some, but it was an hour or two before. So I'm up there all alone. The road got slippery. The mud was I crashed a couple times, and every time I crashed, I'm sliding, and there's a cliff on the side of the road, and all I'm picturing is just crashing and sliding off the side of that cliff, and no one ever know because it's pitch black. So I'm covered in mud, and eventually Rob comes up behind me, and the two of us team up to try to get down that descent together. And it starts snowing. The mud starts freezing. And so by the time we got into Fernie, it was about 1 a.m, and it was covered in head to toe in mud. After being out on doing Coco Climb in the morning, which was 5 hours of pushing a bike in a hot sun, and just getting to that hotel room in Fernie and getting a shower and being safe again
Yeah.
was great.
Dude, that's day 2. You had to.
Yeah.
That is a moment when you really can't look too far ahead. You're like, what the fuck am I doing here?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That was when it was like it really set the tone that the rest of the time I'm like, I don't want to ride at night anymore. I don't think it's safe for me personally to be out here, because I have such a hard time seeing to begin with, and then throw this little spotlight I'm looking through. But then at any point for the whole rest of the race, if it's at some point in the evening and you're looking and you got a mountain pass up ahead of you, are you going to be able to get over that before it gets dark again? And if the answer is I don't know, then I would just choose to stay where I was rather than trying to push it and get stuck up again. So that ended up, being pretty formative in how I approach the race going forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll never forget that night in the executive suite at the Best Western in Fernie.
Best shower of your life.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I know this is a big question. I saved some of the hard question for last. You've been primed. You've had some time to get comfortable, and you've had some time back at home. I want to know what are you going to take away from this experience? Like you've mentioned several times that you don't know if you'll ever get another chance to do a Tour Divide. This may be a one shot. You did it, man. Like it took longer than you thought, but I mean, you never gave up. You're back home now, and you got that Tour Divide buckle, so to speak. What does finishing mean to you? Like, what are you going to take from this experience?
And this is a personal demon of mine is I remember how I used to ride when I was a kid and in high school. And I know how I ride now when I can't see what I'm doing. And I've always felt like I ride much slower and tentatively and would appear less capable than I feel like I should be. And I feel like having done something like Tour Divide, like if I can do that, then I know I can do any other thing that I try out here. So it kind of, conquers that personal demon.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think the big takeaway, honestly, for me is what an amazing community I have around of friends and family. There's a few instances during my adventure there where people just went so far out of their way, from the friend that flew to El Paso and came to get me in Old Wells to friends that drove 7 hours to come intersect me just to say hi. I can't tell you how many people reached out and sent me messages along the way. And as we've talked about, this race has as many emotional highs and lows as it does physical highs and lows. And some of those things came through at exactly the right time. So just knowing that, that sort of, I had that sort of friend and family group around is just, it means so much. And yeah, it was maybe something I didn't really realize going into it. But now that was really driven home during the whole adventure.
Big question, and you knocked it out of the park. Those are both gifts, and that's amazing. That's a great, reflection on both of those. And congratulations again on finishing. Very inspirational, very cool, very happy for you. I hope other people will you look at you as an example of being able to push onward. Like life throws some shit at us sometimes, but we can rise to the occasion, and you sure did, man.
Yeah.
I wanted to close. Very slow. Hey, one of my taglines is pro slow. I lean into the slow, and
all right.
And what that means to me is you can always go slower. If something's hard, you can just go slower, and slowness to the point that you could take a nap on the side of the road. Like you can always go slower, so you could take a rest day, right?
Yep.
Like I'm pro slow over here, so you're speaking my language. I wanted to close out the show by giving you an opportunity to talk about the foundation that you raised money for on the Tour Divide. I know you touched on it earlier, but how much money did you raise, and what foundation is that?
So blows me away, but we've raised $28,000 throughout this whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's all for Foundation Fighting Blindness. So they are the leading funder of research into blinding diseases. So there's a lot of research around genetics and genomics, and then drug development, and they also do a lot of community outreach. They have different programs to reach out to people who are newly blind, or struggling with some of the stuff that I struggled with a while ago now. And there's a ton of research right now into different cures, through things like CRISPR and other gene editing and gene modification technologies that are now coming to through different clinical trials and now coming to market. There's a lot of hope for not just people with Stargardt's, but people with other genetic diseases, both eye-related and not. And so the work they're doing and helping to fund, research and push some of those drugs through clinical trials and into the market, it's phenomenal work, and I'm proud to be able to support them.
Wow, that's amazing. That sounds like we could do a whole nother podcast just on that. I would be a fish out of water, but really fascinating where we're at in our point in human existence and the technologies and the stuff that seems to be coming down the pipeline, including like what you do for a living with your cancer research and stuff. I mean, it's quite amazing. How like hopeful, where are we at in the current landscape of medicine with fighting blindness? Like, do you feel like within your lifetime there could be a cure?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So when I was diagnosed in 2000, the specialist I was seeing said, look, you're not so rare, or your case isn't so rare that I would write a paper about you. But there's less than 20,000 people in the US that have this, and you're never going to see a cure. You're never going to see any research. You're never going to see, anything, because there just isn't a market for it. There's not enough incentive for a drug company to do development. That was 20 years ago. Now, I used to keep an eye on drug development and and other paths, stem cell therapies, things like that. And 10 years ago, I could tell you about all the different options that are out there and different promising things that are coming along. Now, man, there's so many out there, I can't even keep track of them all. There's so many things that are in clinical development, clinical trials, and a lot of the technologies that would apply towards, the same thing that can help sickle cell is also helping retinal diseases. So there's just so much attention, so much, progress being made. It's just amazing. Like I said, I literally can't keep track of it all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very optimistic. I think there's a lot of promising treatments that will help halt the progression of things like Stargardt's, which will help a lot of the people as they're newly diagnosed. And then there's a lot of regenerative medicines that will help someone like me that has already been living with this.
Wow. Truly incredible. It's amazing some of the technology and medical care that we have access to, and the horizon looks very promising on a lot of levels for a lot of different diseases. So I'm not an expert. I like to listen to a lot of podcasts with people who know what they're talking about. But it does seem to be an exciting time to be living in that regard. So I assume people can still donate if
Yes.
donations are open. So where can people go if they want to contribute to the Foundation of Fighting Blindness?
Yeah, so the best thing is to go to blindguybiking.org. I have links from there to the fundraiser, and you can read more about my story and why I'm raising money for Foundation Fighting Blindness, and then make donations right through there.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I really enjoyed watching your videos. I totally admittedly, I started watching because I'm researching you for the podcast, but I started binge watching them. I'm like, I want to know how this ends, even though I know how it ends, but they do a great job of taking you along for what it's like to be out there for 47 days, which is not a perspective we often see. And I think it's a good perspective, and I really am enjoying watching you go through that experience. So, yeah, man, I appreciate you putting all that out there in the world for everybody. I appreciate the work that you're doing to fight blindness, and on a personal level, just being an inspiration to people, that, you can not let challenges in your life hold you back, essentially, because we're all going to have different kinds of challenges. But I think that's an important perspective to keep and have,
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it, man. Until next time, go ride your damn bike.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you having me on and getting this opportunity to chat with you. This has been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we'll do it again one day. Go ride Silk Road or something. Just kidding. Take some time off, enjoy it, and then we'll talk later.
All right, sounds good.
All right, Chris. Have a good one.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much. Bye.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks and congratulations to Chris for coming on the podcast and sharing his amazing story and journey with us. And don't forget to check the show notes if you'd like to support the show. And I've also included information on how to follow Chris and donate to that foundation if you would like. All right. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure. Until next time, you know what to do. Go ride your damn bike.
It was the middle of the night. You grabbed your knife and you held it tight. The sounds of beasts kept you awake. The sounds they made kept you afraid. In the morning, you packed your bike. Memories forgotten from the previous night. You rode faster than ever before. Was it your imagination or merely folklore? Fear turned into strength as you pushed further. Every pedal stroke, stronger and firmer. Your bike feels weightless, your legs aren't tired. You think to yourself, just a few more miles. Bikes.